At the very end of the world, in the windswept lands of Tierra del Fuego, lived a creature that should NT have existed. It was a companion to the indigenous Selknam and Yagan peoples, a hunter, and a living blanket against the bitter cold. They called it the Fuegian Dog, but for centuries a question lingered. What was it really? The answer, unraveled by modern science, is far more fascinating and tragic than anyone imagined. Because this animal wasn't a dog at all. It was something entirely unique. The only known tamed fox in human history, a creature caught between two worlds, whose story ended in extinction. For years, the identity of the Fuegian dog was a complete mystery. Early European explorers from the 18th and 19th centuries couldn't agree on what they were seeing. One French navigator in 1883 described it as ugly, with long tawny hair and a sharp snout, looking quite like a fox. Others thought maybe it was a strange hybrid, a mix of a domestic dog and a fox, or maybe just a weird descendant of dogs brought over from Europe. The truth was hidden in its very cells, waiting for the right tools to be revealed. That moment came in 2013. Scientists Romina Petrig and Martin Fugasa got their hands on a taxidermized specimen from a local museum. They managed to extract DNA from its hair samples and ran the analysis. The results were stunning. They compared the Fuegian dog's DNA to a domestic dog, and the similarity was about 88.93%. But then they compared it to a local wild canid, the culpeo fox. The match was a staggering 97.57%. The case was almost closed. This wasn't a breed of dog in any sense we understand. It was a tamed culpeo fox. Now, the culpeo itself is interesting. We call it a fox because it looks like one, but genetically it's actually in a separate genus, closer to wolves and jackals than to true foxes. This meant the indigenous people of Tierra del Fuego had done something incredible and unique. They hadn't domesticated the gray wolf, which is the ancestor of all our modern dogs. They had formed a partnership with a completely different local animal, a unique domestication event that happened nowhere else on Earth. But as with all good science, the story doesn't end there. Just in 2023, researchers Fabian Yaksic and Sergio Castro proposed a new layer to this mystery. They looked back at all the conflicting historical accounts and suggested that maybe, just maybe, the term Fuegian dog was being used to describe two different animals. They theorized that inland groups like the Selknam had the tamed culpeo fox, which they label the Patagonian dog. This was the hunter, the wilder companion. But coastal peoples, like the Yagan, may have had a true domestic dog, one descended from ancient dog populations that crossed the Bering Strait with the first peoples of the Americas. This would explain why some explorers described fox-like creatures, while others described animals that seemed more like typical dogs. Science is a process of refinement, and this theory attempts to reconcile all the pieces of the puzzle. But the most unique part of the story, the part that captures the imagination, remains the tamed fox. So what was this tamed fox actually like? Surviving descriptions and a few rare photographs paint a picture of an animal that never truly shed its wildness. It had the classic fox look: erect ears, a pointed snout, a thick bushy tail, and a coat of long, tawny brown or sometimes pure white fur. They were about the size of a Shetland sheepdog, weighing anywhere from 5 to 13.5 kilograms. Local gauchos, the cowboys of South America, had a telling nickname for them: maned dogs, because they looked so much like the maned wolf. One writer, Lucas Bridges, gave a particularly vivid description, saying they looked like a stunted cross between an Alsatian police dog and a wolf. But its wildness wasn't just in its appearance, it was in its soul. This was not a loyal, fawning pet. It was often described as aloof and independent. One of the most chilling accounts comes from Julius Popper, a man infamous for his role in the Selknam genocide. He wrote, with cold detachment, I never saw them take an aggressive attitude or defend their masters when these were in danger. This wasn't the kind of bond you see between a person and a German Shepherd. It was a partnership of convenience, a creature living alongside humans but never truly surrendering its wild instincts. It had a high prey drive and would often wander off to hunt on its own, behaving much like an Australian dingo. If they weren't loyal protectors, what good were they? Their role in the lives of the Fuegian and Selknam people was deeply practical and essential for survival. Their cultural importance is baked into the language itself. The Yamana language has over 160 different words and phrases just related to their dog. One of their key jobs was hunting. They were too small to take down large prey like the guanaco, but they were expert otter hunters. Even Charles Darwin, in The Voyage of the Beagle, noted their skill. They would also hunt small rodents called tuco-tucos and were even used to help herd fish into nets along the coast. But perhaps their most vital function had nothing to do with hunting. It was about warmth. Tierra del Fuego is an incredibly harsh, cold environment. The Fuegian Dog served as living, breathing hot water bottles. At night, the Selknam and Fuegian people would sleep huddled together with their pack of canids, the animals pressing in close to share body heat. That same man, Julius Popper, observed this and wrote that in his opinion, the dogs were only useful to complete the defective garment of the Indian, or better, as the ONA's heating furniture. While his tone was dismissive, his observation was spot on. It was a perfect symbiotic relationship. The humans provided food and shelter, and the foxes provided the essential warmth needed to survive the frigid Patagonian nights. This unique partnership, which may have lasted for thousands of years, was wiped out in just a few decades. Its end was sealed with the arrival of European settlers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The settlers brought a new way of life, and with it, a new animal: sheep. The introduction of large-scale sheep and goat farming created a direct and fatal conflict with the Fuegian dog. A missionary named Thomas Bridges wrote in the 1880s about how the canids would attack his mission's goats. This fierce nature, the very wildness that made them who they were, was now seen as a threat to the settlers' livelihood. As ranches expanded across the land, a systematic extermination campaign began. European ranchers and paid headhunters hunted the Fuegian dog to extinction. It was a tragedy that directly mirrored the concurrent genocide of the Selknam people themselves. As the indigenous culture was destroyed, so too was their animal companion. The speed of the disappearance was shocking. In 1919, a Silesian missionary named Martin Gosinde visited the Fuegian people. He had read all the earlier accounts and expected to see these famous dogs. But they were gone. Every last one. When he asked what happened, the people told him the entire population had been exterminated because they were deemed dangerous to men and cattle. The last confirmed Fuegian dog disappeared from the face of the earth sometime in the early 20th century. Today, nothing remains of the living Fuegian dog. All we have are a few lonely, taxidermized specimens in museums in Chile and Argentina. These silent relics, combined with the scattered accounts of explorers and the power of modern DNA analysis, are our only windows into the story of this lost creature. The tale of the tamed fox of Tierra del Fuego is more than just a piece of trivia. It's a poignant reminder of the complex and diverse ways humans and animals can coexist. It challenges our simple definitions of domestication, showing us a partnership built on mutual need, not total control. And, most importantly, it is a stark and cautionary tale of extinction. It shows how quickly a unique species, and the human culture that was inextricably linked with it, can be erased by colonization and conflict. The ghost from the end of the world is gone, but its story serves as a powerful lesson we should never forget.